I've never really heard someone say I'm proud to be white there, but a line that comes out loud is I'm proud to be Australian, which I think is similar to here. And I've always wondered if that's extending from like, is that because we see our normal person, like I mentioned earlier, as being a white, so we just say that, we assume.
What? I don't think that's what people are saying. I don't think people are throwing shade.
What do you guys notice about whiteness here in the U.S.? We'll start with you, Rebecca. Like, when you think about white Americans, like how they talk about it, how they are, et cetera, what do you notice? What stands out for you?
I think there's a lot more emphasis on being white here when you meet someone.
When you say emphasis, you mean like people, they bring it into the conversation?
Yeah.
Does anybody want to add on to what Rebecca just said about Americans sort of bringing whiteness into the conversation?
Well, I was going to say, I feel like, especially now in the United States, people bring race into pretty much everything, whether we like it or not, and whiteness happens to be one of those things that they just bring in. And I don't necessarily think it's just white people who talk about whiteness. I feel like everybody talks about whiteness. What are the common things that you hear people saying about whiteness here in the United States? Well, one of the, I don't know whether to call it a good thing, but one of the things about social media and being connected all the time is that you can hear people who are extreme on both sides. So, you can hear people in God knows where they are talking about how great it is to be white and, how great they feel being white and how whiteness is awesome and everything. And then on the other end, obviously you can hear people talking about how, they view whiteness as something not necessarily to be proud of. It seems to me that one common thread here in the United States among white people is that most white people have learned or don't feel proud about being white. It's more.
To me, this is just kind of strange because we're in a weird climate now where people try to use whiteness as an insult. And I don't know where this came from because honestly, for the past 4 years, I've been so focused with my degree, trying to graduate from school. I've just focused on that. I never looked at someone's race and thought, wow, you have something that I don't. To me, it's just kind of foolish because everyone's life is different. Even statistically, if you were to bring up that, financially, white Americans aren't even the highest financial group in America. They're number 2 or 3 behind Asian Americans, and then you have Indian Americans. So even financially, they're not the highest. So I honestly thought it was maybe sarcasm, but it's a real thing. But anyways, let's continue.
More shame than pride here.
It's because how other countries kind of view America in a way. So like, I don't know, often Americans are kind of posed as like, I don't know, obese, white people that just sit around and like do nothing all day. So I feel like maybe that has something to do with it. It's like, oh, I'm just American type of thing. It's just...
We have a really unique history in that it's Europeans that came and started creating this concept of race. Because race is very much a European-created concept. And the development of race as a term goes right along.
Is that true? Did Europeans create race? Okay, he's a professor, Dr. Sam Richards, at Penn State. So if he says it's true, I'm just going to go from the presumption that it's true. I would say this: prior to race, let's say it's a European thing, there was something called a caste system which existed, which isn't necessarily race, but it was a form of unchangeable oppression. Basically meaning, despite how you act, despite your personality, despite any characteristic you have, you will be subjected to wrongdoing just based off of what family that you're born from or what area that you're born from. So the reason I'm bringing this back to race is because let's say the Europeans did create race. I don't even know if this is true. He's a doctor, so I'm sure he knows more about this than me. I'm 100% sure he knows more about this than me. But oppression based off of unchangeable characteristics, that was not created by Europeans. So I would say that.
Along with slavery. Slavery has always existed in the world. There's always been slavery. Slavery is just taking somebody from some group and saying, you're going to now be part of our group and you're going to work for us. You're going to be part of us. You're going to do something I want you to do. And I'm going to pay you very little money or pay you no money at all. And I'm going to force you into some kind of relationships of some type of bondage. That's always existed. And always existed because life is really brutal and short, man. And you need other people to be part of your groups, especially the smaller the groups are. And most of human history is hunting and gathering groups. You need other people to be part of you. So when you meet another group and you can conquer them, they become part of you, but then they become part of your group, right? They don't just become outsiders. They really often become. So the person that could be a slave very quickly is not a slave anymore. But sometimes they really truly are slaves, and based on whatever characteristics you could have. But Europeans did this thing that people had not done before, which is enslave people on the basis of their physical characteristics and where they were from. So if you're going to go to Africa, you're going to go to this continent, you're going to take these people and you're going to bring them to the Americas, and you're going to say, we're going to force you to work for us. You're going to force you to be in bondage here. You have to have some kind of reason to put them in bondage. And the reason then becomes, well, you're inferior. And we know you're inferior because you look like this. And so that just hadn't happened in history. Like, just had not happened. So we created this.
I don't know if that's true, man. Did caste system enslave based on physical characteristics? Yeah, that happened prior to the Europeans. The Indian caste system, they definitely had that happening based off of physical characteristics. This is not the first time that happened. That's not true. The Indian has the world's longest surviving social hierarchy of a caste system based off of discrimination. But he's prefacing his statements, and I'm not trying to go against Dr. Richards. He's just prefacing his statements based off of race specifically. But in terms of enslaving someone based off of purely physical or purely unchangeable characteristics, the Europeans were not the first to do that. I won't let that stand. It's not true.
It's really wild history here. So the whole race conversation, when we talk about white people, it's all connected in that way, right? So now the question is, this is what Americans are grappling with. So what do you all see? Like, you can't stand up and just be like, hey, I want to talk about my whiteness, because whiteness comes along with a certain kind of shame or a certain kind of like, it's not good to be white.
There's definitely a component here where, I mean, there were people in the past in this country who maybe put a bad name on being proud of being white because they were being proud of being white for the completely wrong reasons. I mean, they were like, I'm white and I'm better than everybody else. Yep. So I think I don't know if it's understandable, but there certainly is a feeling that if anyone who's white expresses their pride, or maybe not even pride, just the fact that they're white, it's almost like wait, are you trying to say that you're like them, that you're you're proud of because you're white and because everybody else is inferior, or like what's the reason,
Right. So if you any acknowledgement of some kind of pride to be white is pride to be a part of the conquering group, and that's seen, and you can't do that. But you could be proud to be Irish, right? And that's okay. As many Americans are. Irish are really quite.
Which is also interesting because, like, as you just said, like, I feel like in Europe, we judge America for being whites being racist or whatever, but I think a lot of people don't know that it actually stemmed from Europe. But people in Europe are like, oh, like I'm proud to be Irish, I'm proud to be British. But when America do it, it's wrong because we think that that's where racism comes from, but that's not actually where it comes from.
Okay, right. Okay, so Americans can be, I'm proud to be American, but proud to be white is something else. Yeah. Bro,
I really don't understand that. I don't get it. I just think I'm too... This doesn't make sense to me. Why can't you say I'm proud to be white, but you can say I'm proud to be European or I'm proud to be British? Weren't it the British colonies that were one of the main pieces of this transatlantic slave trade? So if you were using this argument, why would you be allowed to say I'm proud to be British? Why don't people get offended when people say I'm proud to be British or I'm proud to be European or I'm proud to be Spanish? Why don't people get offended? Because these places had some of the main colonies that were big pieces in the transatlantic slave trade. Or you could talk about some of the African places that sold some of their people in the transatlantic slave trade. All I'm saying is people nitpick whites specifically when they talk about racism, when they talk about wrongness within history. They nitpick whiteness specifically. It is so strange to me because if you're going to nitpick whiteness, you can literally nitpick anything. You can nitpick men. You can nitpick Europeans, Spanish, Africans, Indians. You can nitpick any aspect depending on how far back in history you go or what land you're looking at in history. It's just this never-ending cycle of prejudice.
so this is in Australia, right? Like you've had the public shaming of white Australians.
I wouldn't necessarily say like it's very similar to America, and I would say kind of building off what you were saying, like I've never really heard someone say I'm proud to be white there, but a line that comes out loud is I'm proud to be Australian, which I think is similar to here. And I've always wondered if that's extending from like, is that because we see our normal person, like I mentioned earlier, as being a white? So if we just say that, we assume that by saying that, it's like an indirect way. But I think it's very similar along the lines of America. Like coming here, I didn't see it as like a big difference in how it doesn't really come up a lot.
I don't think that's what people are saying. I don't think people are throwing shade at another group of people when they say I'm proud to be, let's say, Australian. I think people are just proud of their cultures. I mean, their place's culture. I'm proud of the foods we eat. I'm proud of the way we open the door when someone walks by. I'm proud of how we communicate. I'm proud of the way we dress. I'm proud of the fact that we always wear red ties on Sundays. All I'm saying is when people say I'm proud of so-and-so, they're alluding to their culture in most cases. I'm proud that I do this. I'm proud of the good that comes from us. They're not trying to, at least I don't think the normal human is trying to throw shade or downgrade or diminish another race or ethnicity when they say I'm proud to do this or I'm proud to be this.
A lot, like I haven't heard anyone here particularly say, but you said, or back home, for instance.
But but back home, is there kind of a shaming that white people experience? Like because dude, let's be clear. What happened to the Aboriginal peoples in Australia is similar to what happened to indigenous American Indians here. I mean, the slaughter, really a genocide, right? The killing. So when you say I'm proud to be Australian, do people link that with, but dude, the Australians, who are mostly white, because that's what you're talking about, when people say that, are they, A, including the indigenous peoples into that analysis, into that group? And B, are they saying it with an awareness of what the white Australians did to the Aboriginal people?
I would say for us, it's the reason people can say it differently than here is because not as many people know our history of what happened and the negative connotations associated with basically, and it's not always true, like there was a ton of immigration to Australia in the late 20th century, but that's kind of what white Australian extends from. And obviously, there's a huge islander population, people from Papua New Guinea,
Yep.
Maoris from New Zealand, and I think there's cultural diversity in that as well, who come in and they're just as Australian as anyone else. But I do think that there's a negative undertone associated with, like, I think our best instance is Australia Day. The day is celebrating, like, when the English arrived in America. It's like our equivalent of 4th of July.
Yep.
And it's technically celebrating our
the
arrival
English-
is celebrating the basically annihilation of.
When the English arrived in Australia.
Yeah, you're still.
My thing is, why do people nitpick negativity when it comes to explaining history? A lot of positive things happen in history. I promise a lot of positivity happened, but we always nitpick the negative. But anyways, I don't think anyone should be ashamed of their culture, their race, or their ethnicity. I think it's kind of weird to be ashamed of it. But if you have any suggestions for me, comment down below.